Well, good morning to all of you here in Cleveland, those who are joining us over in our Dahlonega campus, those who are watching online. I know it is a holiday weekend, so a lot of people are traveling, and you may be watching us from all kinds of other places, so really good to have you with us. We started this series last week called Weaklings, and it's for all of us, and I include myself in this number, who ever struggle with doubts and insecurities, especially when it comes to your faith, and trying to figure out kind of the bigger things of life. If you've ever struggled and you've had doubts and all these insecurities, or if you've ever fallen short of your own standards or God's standards, or you feel like you just don't have what it takes to ever be used by God in a real way, right? If that's any of you, that's who this series is for, because I can tell you, I have felt that way even as a pastor. Some people think, oh, if he's a pastor, then he doesn't feel that way. He's got so much faith and so much confidence. But that's not true, okay? I have as much insecurity as anybody else. In fact, I tell people all the time, I don't necessarily expect, ask, or want you to call me pastor, because if you knew my story and what I deal with, you might not want me to be your pastor, right? Because I'm just human like everybody else. But the other thing is, I want to remove whatever barrier you kind of artificially or people artificially put between what I do and what you think God can do in your life, right? Because you may think, oh, he's got, an edge, and I don't, right? I am just as flawed, just as frail, and there's sometimes in my life where I thought, man, I'm just too far gone, too messed up for God to ever use me. And so here's what I want you to think anytime you look at me, okay? If God can use him, he can definitely use me, okay? He can absolutely use me. Right? Because I am not full of all the confidence that people think I have. And here's the good news for all of us. We're not the first ones to feel this way. Right? If you actually go and read the Bible, you will see that all those people we call heroes of the faith were a bunch of weaklings. Like all of them. Right? From the beginning to the end, they all fell short. They were all flawed. They all had doubts and insecurities. And it's like, the great heroes of the faith. I mean, Father Abraham, the father of the faith. If you just read his story, you will see how many times he acted faithless and he acted out of fear and intimidation from other people, right? So we're all in the same boat. And if you read, especially the Gospels, the biographies of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you will see that all of the people in there, in fact, this is part of the argument that makes the Gospels, right, like accurate and true and believable. Like if the people who wrote those were making it up, they made themselves look terrible, right? Because they exposed all of their weaknesses and all of their flaws and all of their shortcomings. They didn't make themselves out to be the heroes at all, which is why we ought to take it seriously. And so if you read those Gospels, you will see that even Jesus' followers, many of his close followers, they left him. In fact, all of his apostles, like the closest 12, the ones who are the designated ambassadors, representatives of Jesus, they all left him. They all believed something and then unbelieved it. They were all in and then they were all out. They deserted him. We're going to talk about that today. And so here's kind of good news for all of us. We're not the first, but here's some better news, right? The followers of Jesus who looked the weakest were the ones that Jesus used to change the world. And so there's hope for us weaklings, right? Who are in over our head, who feel like God is asking us to do something or accomplish something that's beyond us, or even to be something that is so far beyond our scope and our reach. And it's not a matter of strong convictions and commitments, because I know a lot of times we'll say that. We just need to be more committed. If you can just, muster up more commitment. Listen, these followers of Jesus, they had strong convictions just like we do, just like you do. You have strong convictions. You have a strong sense of right and wrong, what's true and what's not. Even when it comes to your ideas about God, you have strong convictions about what you believe and what you don't believe and how it all works and how it doesn't work, right? So we have some strong convictions, and we have some really strong, bold commitments, right? Because we've all made those commitments, I promise that I will, and always, and never, and all of that. And we're quick to make those commitments, and we mean them sincerely. And it's those convictions that we have and those commitments that we make that give us a sense of confidence, right? I love one of the songs we sang today. I've got my confidence back. And where's that confidence come from? Well, I made some commitments, right? I got some convictions. I figured out some answers, right? And so my convictions and my commitments are what kind of bolster and give me confidence. And we all feel strong until we're tested. And the world has a way of chipping away at those convictions to where, as you get older in life, you realize you know a lot less than you thought you knew, right? Until you get to the point where you say, I don't know anything, right? I was so assured, I was so confident before, and I had such strong convictions, and now I just don't know anything. And you had these strong commitments, but the world has a way of chipping away at those commitments, right? And tempting us, and dragging us away and testing the limits of our commitments. And so it's the convictions and the commitments that kind of give us this confidence, but they're not enough to overcome fear. They're not enough to overcome frustration. They're not enough to overcome temptation, because some of us have been deeply committed. And we have been so convinced with our convictions, right? And we still gave in to the temptation. It wasn't enough. We're weaklings. We failed. We fall. And the ones around Jesus who looked the weakest of all changed the world. And we're sitting here today because God did something in them that helped them get the story to us. And they got the story to us so that we could maybe put our hope and our faith and our trust and believe it enough that we encounter him for ourselves. But when it comes to those convictions and those commitments, we've all got them. Sometimes the strong convictions and those bold commitments are just there to conceal or maybe even compensate for a weakness, right? We all like to think of ourselves in some form or fashion as a mighty lion. We sing songs about that, right? Somewhere inside of me, there's a lion. It's got to roar, right? I was talking about a Christian song. You might have been thinking of the other secular song, right? Hear me roar. We love this idea about lions. If you're not a Christian, go into a Christian bookstore somewhere when you can find one. It's a bizarre experience, I'm sure, for non-Christians. But when you go in there, you will see that we love lions. I mean, we have them on everything. We love lion paintings and posters and T-shirts. And some of you might be here today wearing a lion shirt. I'm so sorry that you chose to wear that today because of what I'm about to say here. But here's the thing. We love lions. And it's true. In Scripture, Jesus, our Savior, he is referred to or called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Judah, one of the tribes of Israel, right, that he came from. And so we love this lion imagery, and we like to think of ourselves as lions. And so we put it on shirts, and we get tattoos, and we do all the stuff with lions. And oh man, we're mighty lions, right? But if we're lions, I think we're more like the one in the Wizard of Oz. That on the outside, you have all the appearance of being strong, right? And intimidating. And you might even be vocal and loud, right? Hear me roar. But I think for many of us, maybe all of us, we're just posturing. We're just posturing. And listen, it's not that we're lying. We're trying. We're really trying to be all of that. Now, I don't know where, if you even buy into the Enneagram stuff. For some of you who are into that Enneagram stuff, if you're in here and you're kind of the combative 8, you're like, yeah, I'm a lion, hear me roar. Okay, you're among a few in the population, okay? There's not many of you. There's more of all the other ones, like the peacemakers right next to you, right? And the peacemakers to those 8s look like weaklings. But there's a whole lot more weaklings than they are lions. And so we think we're the lion, but I think we're more all of us, even those 8s. I think there's a part of us that we're the cowardly lions because we try to, lean on our commitments and our convictions and our loud roars and our loud whatever. But on the inside, we're struggling to cover up something that we're scared of, and that is that we are weak. And just like that cowardly lion in the Wizard of Oz, we want to be strong. We just don't know how. We want to be courageous, but the truth is we're controlled by fear. Even the fighters among us are sometimes fighting out of fear. And here's what I found about a lot of people, especially Christians. The ones who are the loudest are usually the weakest. Have you found that to be true? I know it's true for me because sometimes when I'm arguing the hardest, it's when I'm the most insecure. That when I'm fighting, it's when I'm the most terrified of losing something. When I double down on the arguments because I'm afraid I might be proven wrong. And sometimes when we're the loudest, we're actually the weakest. So what do we do in the Christian world? We have this hyped up spiritual talk, the spiritual lingo, the language that we use, or the scriptures that we take out of context to encourage ourselves with and make a life verse, right? And so there's all this self-talk that we do sometimes. And then we make these bold statements of faith, and we put them on signs and on artwork and on walls and on t-shirts and on bumper stickers and everywhere else to kind of, stir us up a little bit. We boast of our high moral standards, right? Because we're not like the rest of the world. We've got these high moral standards, lofty goals. And here's the other thing. We're really quick to make those commitments, aren't we? Really quick to say, I promise I will always and I will never, and all of those things. And yet when Jesus looked at his closest followers who were doing all of those things, and when he looks at us, he sees our weakness. He knows where we're compensating and where we're hiding. And we can't fool him. We might can fool a lot of people. We might even fool ourselves at times, but we don't fool him. He knows where the limits of those commitments and those convictions lie. It's why on the last night before his, arrest and then crucifixion, when he's having what is called the Last Supper, he starts to have this conversation with his closest followers, and he tells them what's going to happen to him and how hard it's going to be on them, and then what's going to happen to them. And then he says this to all of those who were so committed, such strong convictions. Here's what he says. Then Jesus says to them, this very night, you will all fall away. And here's why. Because of me. You'll all fall away on account of me. I will be the reason you will fall away. They're like, no. You're the reason we stay. You're the reason we have come. You're the reason we left our careers and in some cases family and all, and we put everything on hold so that we could be with you. You're the reason we're here. And he says, and I'm going to be the reason you leave. I'm going to be the reason you drop out. That you unbelieve everything that you believed. I will be the reason that you will regret the last 3 years of your life. I will be the reason that you go back home thinking, what have I wasted? Jesus says, I'm going to be the reason that you will fall away. See, he predicted, some would say prophesied. Okay, what's the difference? Prophesied divine revelation, and he is God in a bod. He is the Son of God, right? So it could be prophecy, but it could also be prediction, where anybody who would have been paying attention to them and their whole history and life could look and say, yeah, they think they're strong. They'll cave. Just like somebody might can look at your life and mine and go, oh, yeah. They think they're all of that. Given the right circumstances and the right situation with the right dangers, they'll cave. Given the right temptation, they'll give in. And they don't have to be a prophet. They can just connect the dots. And so Jesus connected the dots, or maybe he just prophesied being the Son of God. And he said, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you everything's going to happen. Let me tell you what you're going to do. You're going to cave. And you're going to quit. And you're going to be done, and you're going to fall away. That word fall away comes from a Greek word, means to fall away or to stumble or to turn back. It comes from a Greek word where we get the word scandal. It's going to be scandalous. And that's what it is whenever we fall away, isn't it? Whenever we don't live up to our commitments and our convictions, it's scandalous. And he said, because of me, you're going to fall subject to scandal. And then all of them, started with Peter, because he was always the quickest to make the bold statements and the bold commitments, right? He was the vocal one of the group. But he just stands up and says, no, Lord, even if everybody else falls away, I will never fall away. I will die for you. But it wasn't just Peter. It goes on to say that all of them said that. They all pledged their undying loyalty and devotion to Jesus. And they said, we'll all die for you. But Jesus knew about them what he knows about us. They lacked the courage to face the cross and the courage to pay the cost. Because when he had told them before, look, if you're going to follow me, you got to take up your cross, he didn't mean go get a tattoo and a piece of jewelry. It really meant that your lives are going to be on the line and you're going to die. Probably for people who will never change and not thank you for the service that you gave to them. I mean, this is Memorial Day. Isn't that kind of the story of some of the people who died for a group of people who do not thank them or respect them or honor what they died for? You say, man, those are the men and women of great courage. Maybe they were just in a place where they had no choice. But here is Jesus' followers saying, no, we'll die for you. And he goes, no, you won't. He knew they lacked the courage to face the cross. We do too. And he knew they lacked the courage to pay the cost of those convictions and those commitments. And we do too. And here's the thing, when you look at them and you want to go, well, they're a bunch of hypocrites. I think that's a little harsh. They're not hypocritical. They're aspirational. They want to do that. We want to do that. Anybody who's ever signed up to follow Jesus wants that to be true of them, that they can do that, right? Whenever two of his followers said, hey, when you come into your kingdom, put me on the left and on the right. You can trust us to be the second and third in command. And he said, not unless you drink the cup, meaning the cup of suffering, the cross, like I do. And they go, yeah, we can do that. And they weren't being hypocritical, and they weren't lying. They were trying, and they were aspirational, but they were also feeble. And that's where many of us are. And if you've ever felt that way, I want to do it, I just don't know that I can. I want to live up to these commitments, I just don't know that I can. Then Jesus understands you. He knows that following him is costly, it's risky, and it's scary. And if it has not been that for you, then I just question how closely you're following him. Because for anybody who's trying to follow Jesus closely, it is costly, it is risky, it is scary. Here's what I mean by costly. We forfeit something to follow him. We sacrifice some things to follow him. For some, it might be social rejection. Maybe you lost your friends or your circle of friends, but here's the thing, even if you didn't, it changed. It changed those relationships. Maybe you didn't lose your family, but for some of you, there was tension introduced in your family. And for people around the world, some of them did lose their friends and they did lose their family. And that might be true for many of you because it's costly to follow Jesus. It might cost you your reputation, right? You may have a circle of people or some people you work with or go to school with, and they're the intellectual types, and they can't believe that you believe the nonsense about Jesus and about the Bible and all of that stuff. And so it's costing you your reputation with some people. It might cost you some opportunities, things you have to say no to that normally you would be okay with, whether it's your recreation and entertainment or maybe an employment opportunity or a way to get ahead and make some money. And because you're following Jesus, you have to say no to some opportunities to get ahead, and it's costing you something, right? It might cost you financially because of those lost opportunities, or because Jesus might actually want you to contribute to what he is trying to do in the world. And he wants you to give and sacrifice. He wants you to invest, and not just of your money, of your time, of your interest. And he wants you to volunteer and give stuff you get paid to do elsewhere. And it's going to cost you something. It might even cost you physically. We live in the safety and the security of a country that protects our religious liberties, but that's not true everywhere. And some people today, it's costing them their physical well-being and even their lives. And Jesus knew that. Following him would be costly. It'd be risky because there would be some things that would be jeopardized. Your relationships, like I said, they may be in jeopardy. But here's the thing, we don't even know what all is at risk because following Jesus has uncertainty. I wish I could tell you follow Jesus and all works out. We say around here, following Jesus will make your life better and make you better at life. But do not misunderstand that to mean that following Jesus will make life work out the way you want. It's risky. And it's uncertainty. And I'm going to tell you, following Jesus, even if you lose everything, is still worth it. And that's what we mean by making life better, but it doesn't mean it makes it everything you want. It's risky. And so if you came to me and say, well, what's that going to be involved? I don't know. I don't know your life. I don't know what God's got ahead of you, and I don't know anything else. And so there's so much uncertainty, and he's not going to give you all the answers. It's risky. And that's what makes it scary. It's costly, it's risky, and that makes it terrifying and scary because here's the thing. There is an unknown future when you follow Jesus. But there's a known history of what happened to people who did. And that's pretty scary. And so if you think it's all about commitment and conviction, following Jesus requires courage. And that's what we often lack. It's not that we need to be more committed. Some of us say, I don't know how to be more committed. I'm as committed as I know how to be. It's not that we need more convictions, because some of us, gosh, we already carry so much conviction, we don't know how to be more convicted. It's not a lack of commitment. It's not like the disciples were going to go run away from God, Jesus, and go follow somebody else. They weren't doing that. They were just running to hide. They were just going to hide. Either you run and hide or you're stuck and you're paralyzed. Where else do I go? What else do I do? But it wasn't a matter of a lack of commitment or conviction. It was a lack of courage. Let me bring it down to something maybe you'd relate to in an everyday sense. You have seen couples or maybe heard of couples who have dated and even dated seriously and exclusively as adults for a long time, like for years, right? In fact, some of them may have already moved in together, probably shouldn't do that, had kids together, that probably complicates some things, shared bank accounts, boy, it's all getting tangled up. They've done everything but get married, right? And you would think, when are you going to hurry up and get married? And one of them might say, well, the other one is scared of commitment. It's not commitment. They're demonstrating commitment by being together exclusively for years, by entangling their finances, having children, moving in together. They've demonstrated their commitment. It's not a lack of commitment. It's a lack of courage. Because the next step of bringing some level of permanency to that, that's scary. That's risky. That's costly. And so the limits of the commitment aren't what's being tested. It's your courage that's being tested. You're fine with your commitment. You're fine with your convictions. But when it comes to that next step, come on, let's just be honest. I'm going to call you out. You're a weakling. Because that's scary, right? You see, courage is the willingness to act even in the face of fear and frustration, even in the face of suffering and loss and uncertainty. It's why when you finally take that step in marriage, somebody like me stands before you and says, for richer or poorer, you're like, I like the first one. I can deal with that. The poorer part, I don't like that too much. That's scary, right? Health or sickness, I like the health part. But if they get sick, what is that going to require of me? That's scary. And see, there's where we need the courage to be able to live out the commitments, to be able to uphold those convictions, no matter what life throws at us, till death do us part. And those disciples thought, I can do that. We're going to do that. And they all said, they're going to do that. Until later that night, when Jesus leads them out into a garden where he is praying, and then here comes Judas, one of his inner circle people that come to betray him, and he's got a mob and soldiers and religious authorities, and all of that are with him. And it says that those men stepped forward and seized Jesus and arrested him. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Why would they do that? Because of Jesus. He said, you'll all fall away because of me. What did he do? He let them seize him. He let them arrest him. They had been with him for 3 years. They had seen him evade crowds before, mobs of people before. I mean, there was one time in his hometown when he's starting to preach and teach and made these claims about himself that they said, who does this guy think he is? He's not the Son of God. And they were so angry, it said the mob, the crowd, they tried to gather around him to push him off a cliff and stone him to death. And Jesus just walked through the crowd and nobody touched him. It's amazing. He knew how to kind of evade the crowd. Then later, whenever he's feeding thousands and thousands of people and they hear him teaching and they hear his words and then they see him provide for everybody, it says the crowd, the mob, they all decided they were going to make him king and crown him king and kind of just go back to Jerusalem and fight for their liberation. What did Jesus do? He just kind of skirts through the crowd, gets up on a mountain, avoids everybody. You see, Jesus had never let anybody seize him before. He had never been captured or controlled before. He knew how to evade a crowd, whether that crowd was there to kill him or whether the crowd was there to crown him. Jesus was always in charge. In fact, John's gospel, when John is writing about this, he says that when that mob shows up to arrest Jesus, they say that they're coming to look for Jesus of Nazareth, and he just says, I am he. And John says they fell back on the ground. You see, John was saying, it's not that he couldn't resist them. It's that he wouldn't resist them. He didn't do it. Now Peter makes a feeble attempt to fight back, pulls his sword, cuts off a dude's ear. I'm sure he was going for the neck and missed, right? What a weakling. And then when Jesus stops him, heals the guy, and surrenders. Let me just ask, have you ever prayed and asked God or asked Jesus to show up in your circumstance, situation, or whatever, to show up in power? Right? Come on, God. Jesus, show up and heal. Show up and fix. Show up and mend. Show up in power. Show up and put them in their place. Show up to crush my enemies. Show up to help me win. Have you ever prayed that Jesus, God, would show up in power? Or at least empower you? Empower you to be able to do what you can't otherwise do. To empower you to live out your commitments, to live out your convictions, to overcome, to be the winner, right? Have you ever prayed for that? And he didn't? And it's caused you to fall away? And to turn away? Because he didn't? Have you ever prayed for him to empower you so that you could fight your battle, only to have him say, surrender? Right? Come on, Jesus, you got to show up. You got to give me the words. I'm losing this argument. You got to help them see it my way. Come on, Jesus, show up in power. Empower me to win the argument. He just says, apologize. And you're like, wait, whoa, no, ain't doing that. Say, I'm sorry. Let them win. Well, that's what weaklings do. Have you ever prayed for the God of power to show up? And when he does, he makes you a weakling. You see, it's in those moments we need courage to trust when Jesus doesn't do what we expect him to do. When he doesn't do things our way, when we want, how we want, and the timing and all of those things. Right? Listen, when Jesus does not do what we want and what we expect, that's one of the number one reasons that people fall away. Because I prayed and he didn't do it. Because I asked and he didn't come through. Because I needed something of him to empower me, and I was left feeling weak. And I gave in. And I fell away, and I didn't live up to my commitments, and I didn't hold up to my convictions, and none of that's changed about what I feel towards him, except that he disappointed me. I've disappointed him, and I'm done. Interesting note, the disciples ran for their lives. We just run for our lifestyles. They were running to literally protect themselves from execution. We just run to protect ourselves and the lifestyles that we want from God tinkering with it. See, Jesus, he said this phrase, and they had heard him say it before. Blessed. It's like a beatitude, right? If you know the Beatitudes. Blessed, favored, happy is the one who doesn't fall away, get this, because of me. Not because the temptation was so great, right? But because I did not do what they wanted me to do. Blessed is the one who doesn't fall away because of me, because I did something they did not expect. Now, he spoke those words to a group of guys who came on behalf of someone else. It was a group of followers of John the Baptist. John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, born just a few months before Jesus. John the Baptist, this prophet, this wild man that when you read about it, you hear the history of him, he's like the one, they said the voice crying in the wilderness, right? Like, what animals cry out in the wilderness? Predators. That's who cries out in the wilderness. Because if you're a weakling in the wilderness, you stay quiet at night. But it's wolves and coyotes and lions. And here's this guy, he's out there in the wilderness, and he's just crying out in the wilderness. It is John who first recognizes Jesus and points him out as the Messiah, the Savior, God's King, the final King, the one who has come into the world to save all of humanity. In fact, John, he was kind of like a rabbi, a Jewish teacher as well, and he had his own school and his own students and all. And he looked at his students and he said, y'all need to stop following me and start following him. He's the one. And so his his students started migrating to Jesus and his school was shutting down while Jesus' school was taking off and all the students are going over there. And he said, I'm okay with that. I got to decrease. He's got to increase. I mean, this is John. His commitment to Jesus, his convictions about who he was, what he could do, why he was here, it was incredible, way beyond ours. And you talk about a man of courage. John was the most courageous man in Israel. I mean, he stood up to the religious leaders. Nobody else would do that. Not only the religious leaders, he stood up to the king himself, this Jewish king appointed by the Roman Caesar with all the power and might and authority of Rome behind him. John, to the king's face in front of everybody, called the king an adulterer for taking his brother's wife as his own. You talk about, man, speaking truth to power. Man, John's the most courageous guy they knew in all of Israel. But his courage and his commitment were tested. And we saw how those got chipped away. And what we see is a different man in prison. The story picks up like this. When John, who was in prison, the king that he so courageously stood up to has now captured him, has him in prison, and his life is on the line. When he heard about the deeds of the Messiah, what Jesus was doing, he sent his disciples to Jesus and said, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? Here he is in a prison, and it's getting real. And the fear is settling in, and life is chipping away at the convictions and the commitment. And now he said, you're the one, the Messiah, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. He's now saying, are you the one? Or did I waste all my years pointing them to the wrong one? Jesus replied, go back and report to John what you hear and what you see. I'm not even going to tell you what to say. I just want you to look around. And you go tell him what you see and what you hear. And here's what they saw and what they heard. The blind received sight, the lame walk, those who had leprosy were cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead were raised, and good news was proclaimed to the poor, which is awesome. If you're blind, lame, leprosy, deaf, dead, and poor, that's great. If you are the weaklings, Jesus has come to help you. This sounds a whole lot like Isaiah 61, which they would have all been familiar with at that time. You know, this Old Testament prophet who talks about the coming Messiah and what Messiah will do. And in Isaiah 61, it's the text that Jesus, whenever he finally starts teaching publicly, he's at his home, synagogue, and you think of it like a church, but not really, but synagogue, and it's his day to do the Sunday school lesson, and he opens it up, and he reads Isaiah 61, and he says, all of this that the prophet said would happen is being fulfilled by me. It's about me. It's the reason the crowd wanted to throw him off the cliff and stone him to death. In Isaiah 61, it says, oh my goodness, he's coming to preach good news to the poor. Jesus says, you see that happen? And he says he's going to heal people, especially the brokenhearted. But you see that happening. But Isaiah 61 also goes on and it says, and he's going to bring liberty to the captive and set the prisoner free. And John's like, when? Because that one seems to be left off the list. It says it's going to be the year or the season of God's favor for the righteous people like John and vengeance on the evil people like King Herod. When's that going to happen? You see, John had proclaimed that Jesus was the one and pointed everybody to Jesus. And now his situation is starting to pick apart all of that commitment and all of those convictions. And you see a man who's in prison and he's scared. And suddenly the most courageous man in all of Israel has reached his limit. And he's saying, did I point people to the wrong one? Should I be looking for somebody else to point people to? Did I just waste all of these years? That's how Jesus' disciples were when they fled. See, John expected a rescue. Maybe even just a visit. But when John was carried to this particular prison, the stories will tell us that Jesus even went further away in the other direction. He's not even coming to visit. John wants a rescue. Jesus sent back a report of what he was doing for everybody else. Wow, that might like salt in a wound. And then whenever John's disciples left, Jesus does not shame John. He does not scold John. He does not talk negatively about John, even though John's weakness has been exposed. John actually turns around and says, do y'all think this man's weak? You didn't go to the wilderness to hear a weak man. You didn't go out there because he was some kind of broken reed and you're waiting for him to snap. He says, I tell you, there is no one greater of all humanity than John. And Jesus saw the weakness and still thought so highly of John. You see, the most courageous person that the disciples of Jesus ever knew questioned, doubted, was on the brink, if not fully at the place of falling away. And it's then that Jesus said this to the crowd. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble, fall away on account of me. Now, I don't know why English translators do this if you're looking at the NIV version. But that word that says, tonight all of you will fall away, exact same word here. Exact same word. It's just here we say stumble. It's the root word again that we get for scandalous. He says, blessed are those of you who don't enter in some type of scandalous, retreat because of me. Because I don't do what you expect me to do the way you want me to do it. You see, Jesus never pretended that following him was going to be easy. He never did. He was upfront with all of his followers. He's upfront with us. He says that he repeatedly tells us what the cost is. He's like, deny yourself, pick up your cross, sell everything, right? If you love your family more than me, you're not worthy of me. You might lose your family. You might lose everything. In fact, you should be willing to give up everything to follow me. He has never shied away, and he does not pretend that it's easy. He tells you what the cost is. He tells you there's great risk. He kind of pokes the bear to let us know this is going to be terrifying. He even tells his closest disciples not only of the persecution, but the execution that many of them face. And these were not just metaphors. You see, all the original apostles, they were all martyred except for one, John. And John was tortured in ways we cannot imagine and then exiled on a little island separated from everyone. John the Baptist, he goes on to be beheaded. He doesn't get out of prison. He's beheaded as part of the entertainment of the party at the request of Herod's, stepdaughter. Paul, the Apostle Paul, loses everything. His reputation, his freedom, and eventually his head. And today, countless followers of Jesus are suffering in ways we cannot imagine, and many of them are paying with their lives just to be associated with Jesus. And then Jesus, talking to those same followers, and then talking to all of us, warns us of a coming day. That in the last days, how bad it's going to get as people with their commitments and their convictions start to be chipped away and it's all falling apart and the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And he says to us, at that time, many will turn away. Exact same word. Fall away from the faith. But the one who stands firm or endures to the end will be saved. Can I be honest? I don't want to have to endure. I want to evade, right? That's why I signed up for this. How about you? I signed up for Jesus so that I could avoid a lot of this, evade some of this. Like I signed up thinking that if I followed Jesus, that illness would not hit my family and all that like it does everybody else. I signed up thinking that I wouldn't have to deal with the persecution, the loss and all that. I signed up for Jesus like some kind of fire insurance from hell, but also life insurance now. That's why I signed up for this. And he's telling me that it's going to get bad and many are going to fall away, but I'm supposed to endure. I don't want to endure. I want to evade. But enduring says more about courage than commitment, doesn't it? It's more about courage than even conviction. Because you can still, it's not like I'm running to somebody else. I'm just trying to hide. Now let me just say, if John the Baptist, the most courageous man probably in all of history, and Peter and the disciples, the one who were present with Jesus and saw everything with their own eyes, if they all lacked the courage to endure, if they all lacked the courage to live out their commitments, if they all lacked the courage to uphold their convictions, I am certain I don't have it. And I doubt many of us do. And Jesus knew that about all of them, and he knew that about us. He knew that when times got tough, we might cave and we might quit. That's why just before he makes this statement about all of you falling away, when he's at the Last Supper and he's telling them what's going to happen to him, and he's telling them what's going to happen to them, and he talks about what's going to happen to many of us. Here's what he says. In this world you will have tribulation. Now some translations say trouble. That's not a strong enough word. It's tribulation. Like, okay, let me just say it this way. In this world, all hell will break loose on you. Anybody been there? In this world, as long as you're in this world, all hell will break loose on you. It's like, well, that's what we signed up for, to kind of prevent all of that. You see, this is spoken at the Last Supper as he's telling them about how all hell is going to break loose on them. And I love this. And I'm telling you these things so that you'll have peace. And I'm like, what kind of sick humor is that? Right? It's like the doctor coming in and saying, let me just tell you how bad this surgery is going to be, how bad the operation is going to be, how bad the recovery is going to be, how bad the physical therapy. It's going to be awful. But I just want you to be at ease. That's why I'm letting you know ahead of time. It's like, I'm so torn up on the inside. Are you kidding me? Right? And he says, I'm doing this so you'll have peace. He also says this, and I'm telling you so you won't fall away. Then he goes on and says, but take courage. I've overcome the world. Get what he's doing here. He is not giving them a pep talk on how they can have positive thinking, positive affirmation, boost your self-esteem. He didn't say, hey, in this world, all hell's going to break loose. But you got this. You can do this. I'm telling you, I believe in you. I know you. There's more in you. I mean, there's a lot of sermons like that. There's a lot of coaches like that. There's a lot of books written like that. Jesus does not come in and says, when all hell breaks loose, I'm just telling you, you got this. He doesn't say that. He says, I got this. I got this. See, here's the thing. He didn't give us a pep talk. He didn't give us a life verse. He didn't give us all that kind of stuff that we want. He gave us himself. I've overcome the world. So you need to be with me. You see, he gave us himself. He gave us his spirit, which is so powerful. You got to be around here in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about this. Because if nothing else, his spirit enables us to be aware of his presence when all hell breaks loose. It's his spirit that when we're in our own prison, we will know, oh wait, Jesus went the other way, but his spirit is here with me. It just seems like when Jesus left and went back to heaven, he went farther from me, but his spirit lets me know he's right here in this prison with me. He overcame the world. The best I can do is stick with him. You see, he gave us himself. He gave us his spirit, and then he invites us to trust him. To trust him so that we don't fall away, but get this, but to trust him that he has grace and mercy and forgiveness for when we do. For when we do. We all want to be lions, but Jesus expects us to be like lambs, not lions. You know, there's only one verse you'll find in the entire Bible that talks about, people of God being like lions. It's in the Old Testament. It said the righteous roar like lions, right? But you will find a ton of scriptures that talks about the followers of God, and especially the followers of Jesus, being like lambs. Now, if you're going to compare a lamb and a lion, which one's the weakling? Exactly, right? And he says you're like lambs, meek, humble, vulnerable, defenseless, lambs, weaklings. Here's what he said. He said to his disciples when he was sending them out to other cities, he said, I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves. They're going to tear you up. And you're like, wow, I'd rather you send me out like lions among the wolves so I can tear them up. But you're going to send us out like lambs among wolves. He said, yes, lambs, weaklings. I am sending you out in a hostile world as weaklings. Can you believe? When he told them, tonight all of you will fall away. All of you will depart from me. All of you will desert me. All of you will flee. He said, here's why. Because the prophet Zechariah said, strike the shepherd and the sheep scatter. And you all think you're roaring lions, but you are humble lambs, weaklings. And our shepherd was struck, and he died, and he rose again to let us know that he's the one who overcomes everything that we're afraid of. And the best we can do is, like lambs, stay with our shepherd. Because a lamb's courage comes from being close to a shepherd, not from pretending to be a lion. Do you get that? It's just like a child. Their courage comes from mom and dad being close. And it's not that we need more commitment and we need more conviction. We need more courage, and that courage comes by only knowing he is with us. Throughout the Bible, when you read it, you'll see these scriptures. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. I'm calling you, O mighty man of valor. Be strong and courageous. All the people of Israel, be strong and courageous. And every time, their courage is associated with his presence. Because I'm with you. Because I'm with you. That's where the courage comes from. So some of you, you don't need to just get more commitment, and you don't need to get more lofty with your convictions. You need to become more sensitive to his presence, because that's where you find the courage. Some of you have already fallen away. I have on more than one occasion. But falling away does not disqualify you from Jesus' love, his grace, his forgiveness. Listen, falling away doesn't even disqualify you from being used by God to accomplish his purposes. There's scriptures in the Bible that talk about people being used by God to accomplish his purposes that have no relationship with God. In fact, there have been times in my own life where I felt distant from God and he was still using me, and I was amazed. You see, falling away doesn't disqualify you from everything that Jesus wants to give you, and it doesn't disqualify you from being used by God. You may just not benefit from it or recognize it or see it. But here's what I can tell you. Staying away will distance you from the very thing you need the most. Him. Him, just him. When Jesus was raised from the dead, he even told him, he said, you're all going to fall away. But when I am raised, I'm going to go ahead of you into Galilee. Come find me there. Come find me there. You see, they all deserted and unbelieved and went back home. But then when the reports of his resurrection happened, they all returned. And when they returned, you would say, well, they returned with power. Their power came in knowing he is raised from the dead, and you cannot separate him from us. They were no stronger whenever he raised from the dead than they were before. They were just more aware of his presence. So as I close today, bow your heads, close your eyes. Is there an area of your life where you just feel weak? And you're trying to posture and pretend that you're the roaring lion and you've got it all together, and you're doing all the self-talk and you're reading all the books and hearing all the stuff, and everybody's trying to kind of change the narrative of what's going on in your head. And maybe you just need to embrace the fact that you're a weakling. We all are. And Jesus knows that and just wants us to be like lambs who run to him instead of run from him, and whose courage is found and being close to him. Heavenly Father, would you help us to do what we can to take steps to be closer to you? However we do that, through our conversations with you, my prayers, through our reading of scripture and hearing your story and how you interacted with other people. But ultimately, Heavenly Father, can we just pause and look for you in the middle of our pain, in the middle of our prison, in the middle of our suffering, in the middle of our addiction. And Heavenly Father, would your presence give us courage to trust you? Courage to trust you when you don't do what we want, what we ask, what we expect. Courage to trust you when you're asking us to surrender. Courage to trust you when you do not heal, when you do not deliver, when you do not set free. Courage to trust you when it's costing us more than we thought we could pay. Courage to trust you when there's more things at risk that we don't want to lose. Courage to trust you when it is scary because we don't know what's next. But you give us the courage to keep trusting you. It's in the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray.